Hello, Section 11. Happy Monday. Hopefully y'all are enjoying these beautiful leaves that I get to look at in my yard and the nice weather, and boy, it's nice out. So hopefully y'all are enjoying that as well. So before we start today, I want to begin by saying you are very, very welcome for what we are about to encounter today. The rule against perpetuities is a topic that is one of the rites of passage of law school. And you will now be in the group of people who can complain about the just complete arcaneness and craziness that is the rule against perpetuities. Okay, so you can now converse with fellow law students across the country, practicing lawyers, etc. I can't tell you how many times I've had students come back to me and say, oh, I was in a job interview and we got talking about property and we all got to commiserate about how crazy the rule against perpetuities was. So you're welcome. It is really my lasting gift to you, to all of you. The other reason I mention all this is to say that each year I think to myself, do I even want to teach the rule against perpetuities? Because I think that the relevance of the rule against perpetuities to real life and to practice is diminishing more and more each year. And so I think there are lots of things we could cover in first year property. And many of them are things that actually will matter and be impactful in practice more often than the rule against perpetuities will. So I think, well, maybe I should just cut out the rule against perpetuities. But every year I don't. And the reason I don't is threefold. One, and first and foremost, and I want y'all to hear this so you can understand where rule against perpetuities sits for me in terms of importance of things we've covered this semester. The first reason is the rite of passage, okay? That I feel like I would be denying you the ability to complain about something that all law students and lawyers remember complaining about, even if they don't remember the rule, okay? So that's the primary reason that I leave it in each year, is because it is a rite of passage. The second reason is because I think that there is value in working through something complex and difficult just for the practice of working through something complex and difficult. That it is a good exercise in tedium that lawyers' brains ought to be able to master. Okay, so it's like the reason algebra or calculus, even though when am I ever going to use algebra or calculus? Okay, so there's that. And then third, it is still a topic that can show up on a bar exam, that can show up in real life. And while we're not going to spend enough time to get to what I would like to call rule against perpetuities mastery, I do think it's important to have a general concept of why there is such a thing, or why there has been such a thing historically, and some of the basics of how to apply it. Okay, so my goal for you guys with this subject, I want you to hear it loud and clear, is not perfect 100% mastery of the rule against perpetuities. What I want you to be able to come out with is an understanding of why we have such a thing and how it is operated, how it operates. Okay, and then perhaps of greatest importance, how it has been reformed. Okay, so that the old rule against perpetuities is quietly being whittled away to where it only applies in a very, very, very small number of arcane situations. Okay. Now, all of that is sort of big picture what I'm thinking. Now, this is where y'all will maybe see where that translates into something that will actually impact your life. I'm not going to say every year that I have a question in the conveyances that is a rule against perpetuities violation, but most years I intentionally put one rule against perpetuities violation among the conveyances. One. Sometimes, because the rule is so difficult to see sometimes, I accidentally have other conveyances that violate the rule against perpetuities, though I'm getting better and better and better, okay, each year. So there's one intentional rule against perpetuities violation max on the exam. When you're doing that problem, which you won't know what it is because it doesn't say like, ding, 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 here's your rule against perpetuities violation. Like part of the test is, can you see that one? When you're doing that, if you get it and you say, yep, I see that that's a rule against perpetuities violation, I know the effect, and I'm going to answer it appropriately, you'll get full credit for that question. If you don't, you'll get probably partial credit for that question if you answer it as though there was no such thing as the rule against perpetuities. Okay? So just by way of example, on last year's exam, the rule against perpetuities question was worth a total of 12 points. If you got it right, fully right, if you just ignored the rule against perpetuities and just gave what it would be if there was no such thing, then you got 5 points. Okay, so that's a difference between someone who has mastered the rule against perpetuities and someone who has pretended that there is no such thing as the rule against perpetuities of 7 points on one question on the conveyances, which comes out usually about to be like 140 or 150 points. So a very small percentage. And remember, conveyances are only 40% of the exam. So a small percentage of 40% of the exam. So I'm saying all that to tell you that if you are tempted to spend a lot of time over the next month trying to master the rule against perpetuities, you are doing that for yourself and not for any impact it's going to have on your performance on my exam. And if you want to do it for yourself, I will work with you all the way through. I will be happy to answer all the questions you want and work with you as much as you want. But I want you to recognize that if that's the choice you make, you're talking about 7 points, maybe, right? And that's if you get to mastery, 7 points on one question on one portion of the exam, which in a marginal circumstance might be a difference. But if you're choosing how to spend your time, there's a lot more points to be had recognizing the differences between the various remainders or between the present estates or the elements of adverse possession or the factors that go into determining found property versus lost versus mislaid. Okay, so I hope I'm getting out loud and clear with where this sits in terms of my priorities for you on the exam. Okay, I can't control how you study, but I'm trying to be transparent about how much time you ought to spend on this. Not much. Okay, I want you to have the concept, the rationale, and the basics in operation, as well as the reforms. Okay, those are things that we're going to cover today. And more than anything else, I want you to have the ability to complain. Okay, to complain and commiserate. Okay, that's why we're doing it. Okay, we good? All right, so let's do the rule against perpetuities. And just before we do, I want to note that the rule against perpetuities is the most famous and utilized of a series of rules. And the series of rules are there to prevent a certain type of problem. Okay, so I want to work through these. Okay. Whoops. Don't look, it's the answers from the last class. Okay. So here is a question. We have two different conveyances here. 2A, so long as it's used for school purposes, and if it's not used for school purposes, then to B. That's one. And then the other, 2A for life, then to B if the Grizzlies move from Memphis. Okay, so I want y'all to somebody bravely work with me to identify what are the interests that are present in these conveyances. So I'm looking for blue hands over here. All right, Harley, you want to do, which one you want to do?
I'll try the first one.
I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello. 1 second.
Can anybody hear her?
Sorry, is this better?
That's better. It's still a little quiet, but it's better. So which one do you want to do?
I'll do the first one, if that's okay.
Okay. 2A, so long as used for school purposes, and if not used for school purposes, then to B. What do we got?
Okay, so A has fee simple determinable. And then B has, let's see. I honestly spent all weekend looking at these. So my brain might still be a little like clogged up. But, and then B has a future interest, which is depending on if A uses the property for school purposes or not. So that is executory interest.
Okay. Good. So you got B's right, but you got A's wrong. So okay. I know why you said fee simple determinable. It's because you saw so long as.
Yeah.
But how do you, but you're right about this. So if you're on your chart, you know that a fee simple determinable will always produce a
possibility of reverter. So this is actually fee simple subject to executory limitation.
Great. Okay. So in fact, Harley's thought process is exactly the thought process that it ought to be. I see so long as, I know that this is a defeasible fee, so long as tells me fee simple determinable. Then I read on and I see that, the future interest is given to a third party. That must be an executory interest because only a grantor could have a possibility of reverter. That must be an executory interest. Therefore, what A had, even though it says so long as, because that future interest is given away and not retained, A must have had a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. It looked like and smelled like a fee simple determinable, but in the end, it turned out not to be. Okay. All right. Harley, since you worked on it all week and you want to do the other one too?
Okay. So A has a life estate.
Yep.
And then to B if the Grizzlies move from Memphis. And then so B has no, that's not right.
It sounded pretty good to me.
Oh, it's a contingent remainder.
Contingent remainder. Okay. So hopefully everybody's able to follow this, right? Obviously the life estate, and then it's a contingent remainder because if that happens, then B will take it, okay? But B is not ready to take it yet. Something has to happen before B is eligible, therefore it's contingent. Okay, so the real question here is what is the problem with both of these conveyances? So Harley, I'll ask you, when might this property in the top example stop being used for school purposes?
When they're, we don't know.
Might it be tomorrow?
It could be.
Might it be the year 2517?
Yes, it also could be that.
Might it be any point in between those two periods?
Yes.
It could be any time. Okay. It could be any time between now and the end of the universe. Okay, that is a long range. What about the second example?
The same case. We don't know when that will.
Same problem. Okay, the Grizzlies might be here until the end of time, or the Grizzlies might leave soon. In case you're worried, if they do leave soon, they have a clause with the city so that they'll have to pay back a lot of stuff to the FedEx Forum. So we're in probably pretty good shape that they're not going to be leaving imminently. Okay, so I know all of you were really worried about that, but it theoretically could happen anytime between this moment and the end of the universe. Okay, so why is Harley? Why is that a problem?
Because it doesn't really can't really gain much if they don't know when if they don't know when this may or may not happen at all. It really isn't an interest if it might not happen at all.
Great. And what about selling this property? Whatever. Let's use the top example. Is it going to be easy to sell?
For A to sell it?
Yeah, for A.
I don't know what.
Well, is it always possible that when you buy it, that you might actually end up forfeiting your ownership if you buy something from A here?
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
If you stop using the property for school purposes, what happens to your interest?
Well, if you buy it from A and it's not for school purposes, it goes to B.
Right. And so you've bought it from A and then you lose it completely.
Yes.
Right. So what the problem is that in both of these examples, the property is saddled endlessly with future interests. Okay. And there's no time limit to them. They are in perpetuity. And so the concern becomes even more apparent if you think about what happens if nobody sells anything. Okay. But time moves on and A passes away and leaves A's interests to A's children. And let's say A has 4 children. And then B passes away and B leaves I'm in the top example, and B leaves their interest to their 4 children. And then all of those kids pass away and they have 4 children each. And so now there's 16 grandchildren of B and let's say 16 grandchildren of A. And so the property is being held in fee simple subject to an executory limitation by 16 people. And then there's 16 other people that have an executory interest. And then multiple generations pass and we get to a point where B has, 370 heirs and A, whatever's happening with the property, the fee simple subject to an executory limitation. And then all of a sudden it stops being used for school purposes. Then who owns the property? The 300 and however many heirs of B. That is no good. Okay, that is a problem. Because first, those people are going to be hard to track down. They couldn't enter the property. They have no reason to know anything about this property. They probably don't even know of their interest in it. They're going to be hard to track down. And second, they are so far removed from this conveyance that it's hard to say that they should have an interest at all. And so in both of these examples, the problem is that there is a contingent future interest that could remain unresolved indefinitely into the future. In this example, it's B's executory interest, and in this example, it's B's contingent remainder. Okay? The rule against perpetuities and rules like the rule or doctrines like the rule against perpetuities are meant to correct for this perpetual uncertain future interest, because perpetual uncertain future interest cause perpetual clouds to sit on top of property interests. They become alienability problems. It becomes difficult to sell because the property always is saddled with this cloud of uncertainty. And so what they do rule against perpetuities and various other doctrines that we're not going to speak about, but that are mentioned in the book, is they work to either destroy or resolve contingent future interests. Uncertain, maybe is a better word. Uncertain future interests. Okay, so that's why we have this thing. It is there to promote alienability by destroying uncertain future interests. And it's just a specific type of uncertain future interests. It's uncertain future interests held by other people. Okay, so it is only uncertain remainders and uncertain executory interests. So the first step in the rule against perpetuities is to identify if you have any interests that are, the wording is, subject to the rule against perpetuities. Because if there are not, then you're good to go. Then you can move on with your life. Okay? You can move on with your life because there are no such interests. Okay. So we are now going to work through, I'm going to tell you up front, this conveyance violates the rule against perpetuities. Okay? This conveyance violates the rule against perpetuities. So you know the answer to this. To A for life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 25. That is an invalid conveyance. We'll talk about exactly the effect of its invalidity in a moment. But I'm going to walk us through a 4-step process that is applying the rule against perpetuities. In a nutshell, what the rule against perpetuities does is it destroys any uncertain future interests that will not be resolved within 21 years after the death of someone who is alive today. Okay? It says it destroys uncertain future interests that will not be resolved within 21 years after the death of someone alive today, or a life in being is sometimes the way it's phrased. 21 years after a life in being. Okay, that's the rule. But that is a meaningless bunch of words because it's just hard to, the concept is hard to even put your mind around. But I think that the steps, the 4 steps to apply the rule are actually pretty comprehensible. So let's do it. So step 1, when you get a conveyance, is you identify the interest. That's what you should always be doing, right? Whenever I give you a conveyance, whenever anybody gives you a conveyance, you're saying, okay, well, what are the interests that are created here? So step 1 is something that you should be doing anyway. With the rule against perpetuities, there's a sort of tweak to it, which is there anything in here that I should be thinking, uh-oh, I need to go to step 2 for a rule against perpetuities? Okay, so looking for a blue hand, what interests are created from this conveyance? To A for life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 25. Okay, Peyton's going to go for it. What do we got?
So A has a life estate.
A has a life estate. Good.
And the 4 children have contingent remainders that are contingent upon reaching the age of 25.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Or
being the first to
being the
reach
first.
the age of 25. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
There's a possibility that an unborn child might come and reach the age of 25. And I guess legally that includes an adopted child.
Okay, born into the world or adopted into the family. Good. I don't know if there are any individuals in our course who are adopted, I was adopted. And so, Peyton, I appreciate you throwing in a little love for the adopted children in the world, because there are more ways than just being born to enter a family. So I and my two dogs are the adoptees into our family. Okay, so unborn or not yet in the family kids will be born into the world or adopted into the family with contingent remainders. Any other interests, Peyton?
Not that I can see.
Okay, you might not be able to see it because it's hidden.
A possibility of reverter if no child reaches the age of 25.
Right, except it's not a possibility of reverter, it is a reversion.
Reversion.
Okay. A reversion in fee simple exists for O here in the event that there is no A's first child to reach the age of 25. Okay, so these are the interests. So step one of the rule against perpetuities is to look at your interests and say, are there any contingent remainders or are there any executory interests? And so Peyton, that's an easy one. Are there any contingent remainders or executory interests? Yes, there are. Therefore, we have to go to step two. Okay. So the first part is the easy part. You do what you would be doing anyway, and then you see if there is anything that you need to move on to step two for. Here, there are. Okay. There are things that you move on to step two, and eventually step three. Okay. So step two. So we have our contingent remainders, and so those are the ones that are vulnerable here. Okay, the contingent remainders are the ones that are vulnerable to the rule against perpetuities in this example. So step two is to identify potential validating lives. So what does that mean, validating life? So I've put it in here on the slide. A validating life, or a life in being, is one that will validate the conveyance so that it doesn't violate the rule against perpetuities. Okay. In order to be a validating life, there is really only one requirement. The requirement is that you are alive at the time of conveyance. That's it. So if we make this conveyance today, then the however many billion of us that are on the planet and alive at this moment, I guess on the planet or in the space station, all of them, anyone alive at this moment, could be a validating life. So that really doesn't help with step two, identify potential validating lives. Because if we're going to say it's anybody, well, that's not really helpful. Then wouldn't that always be the case? So step two is what we really need to do is identify the realistically possible validating lives. And so what we're looking for among the 8 billion alive people at the time of conveyance is we're looking for people that can actually affect the contingent remainders. Okay. And so, Alan, who are in this story, who are people that could affect the contingent remainder being, as Peyton said, A's first child to reach the age of 25. Who are the potential validating lives here?
So you got 4 obvious children here. If any of them hit 25, then
Okay, we're just identifying lives. So,
Right.
so
so W, X, Y, Z. But then A could have another child, and he would be the 5th. I would say there's 5 here.
what about A?
Well, yeah, A would be the 5th. The 4
A would
children.
be good. So you're saying we've got the 4 children plus A. There are a lot of other people in the world, but none of them seem to have anything to do with this contingency. Okay. And so I think this is right. So we have 5 potential validating lives here, even though in theory there could be others. These are the ones that are most likely to affect the conveyance. Okay. All we need is for one of these lives one of these people to validate this in order for the conveyance to survive. To validate means to answer the question that I asked earlier. Will, within 21 years after this person's death, the contingency or the uncertainty of the future interest be resolved? Okay, so it's like you have a fill in the blank. Hold on, let me sneak and see what I need to delete off this next one. Okay. To validate a conveyance, we're asking the question, within 21 years after blank's death, okay, and I've all caps definitely, because this is a matter of logic. There is not is it likely to be resolved, but will it definitely be resolved? Okay. Okay. So that is the question that we are asking, that bottom question. Will it definitely be resolved within 21 years after, and then insert each potential validating life? Okay, so step 3 is to determine if any of the potential validating lives are actual validating lives. Do any of these lives validate the conveyance, so that we can answer the question, within 21 years after that person's death, the uncertain future interest definitely will be resolved? Okay. If yes, we're good. Okay. So, Alan, which of your potential validating lives do you want to start with?
We can start with W.
Let's start with W. Fantastic. Okay. So we're going to ask the question, within 21 years after W's death, will the uncertain future interest definitely be resolved? Now, let me ask you a question before we move forward. Who is most likely to be the first child of A to reach the age of 25?
It would be W.
W, okay? In order for W not to be the first child of A to reach the age of 25, what would have to happen?
He would have to die.
Either W dies, or since we're throwing adoptions in here, or A would have to adopt a child older than W, okay? So there's 2 possibilities. We don't know anything about W's health. We don't know anything about A's propensity for adopting children, but would you say that it's, like if you were betting, would you say, Alan, you would bet on W here?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
No.
So you think it's more likely that X, Y, Z, nobody, or some other person will be the first child of A to reach the age of 25?
No, I'm betting on like the probability that they could all die.
Okay, but that's a different question,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we're gonna. So sometimes I call step 3 having fun, but it's really actually not having fun unless you like killing a lot of people. Okay, so it is definitively not fun, but it is mentally challenging. So if you like mental challenges, then it can be fun. But so Alan, but I'm asking you a slightly different question.
Right.
If I said, here's $100, you need to bet on who is the first child of A to reach the age of 25, where would you put that money?
I'd put the money on W.
You put the money on W. It is more likely that it is W that is going to be this than anybody else. But would you be certain that it's going to be W?
No.
No. Okay. So you're not sure that it's going to be W. But that's not really the question. The question isn't, do we know that it's going to be W? The question is, will we know who it's going to be within 21 years after W's death? Okay. And so I've seen you shaking your head already. You think we will not know who it is going to be within 21 years after W's death. So why do we not know? What could happen, even though it's unlikely?
Well, I mean, the way I'm thinking about it, they could all die in a freak accident. Here's what I'm thinking. If today's Monday and A had a child yesterday on Sunday, and then
Okay.
here we are on Monday and they all die in a freak accident, that child born yesterday is who we would go off of.
Okay.
But I don't want to like confuse the problem.
Yeah. No, you're thinking about it right, but I'm gonna just slow it down until that happens. Okay. So just so everybody's with us. So if W dies today,
Right.
then so the question is, on November, what is today? The 9th, November 9th, 2041, will we know for certain the answer to the uncertain future interest? Will it be resolved? And you're saying no,
Well,
because W is now dead. And so I'll play along. Well, won't we know whether X got to be 21 years old, 25 years old by that time, by 2041?
we would know that. Yeah, we would know that.
Okay, so why does W not work as a validating life here?
Well, if he's alive, he would cut it off, right? He'd be the first
X.
child.
Right. Okay. But do we know that X is going to make it that long?
No.
No. So now give your horrible accident.
Okay. If it's November 9th, or if it's today, everybody died, but there was a child born yesterday, you would add on 21, and even if you added 21, you would validate, or you would violate the rule of perpetuity, because he has to reach age 25, and
Great.
you can't do that.
Great. So what Alan is saying is that even though it's unlikely, I guess, would you, if I give you $100 and I said you can either bet on W or you can bet on that happening, which would you bet?
I bet on W.
You'd bet on W, right? It's much more likely that W is going to make it than that this horrible accident happens while there's an afterborn child and that child is still under 4 at the time of W's death, right? Because that's what we're looking for, right? We need a child Alan is saying born yesterday. It doesn't really matter if it's yesterday or any time in the last 4 years. As long as they're under 4, then they will still be alive, could still be alive, and under 25, and yet the first child to reach the age of 25, that could still all be the case 21 years after W's death, and therefore W cannot validate this conveyance. Okay? Alan, let me ask you this. Can X, Y, or Z validate the conveyance?
I mean, they're in the same boat as W.
Same thing. Okay, so we're gonna skip it, and I'm just gonna tell you, if it doesn't work for one child, it ain't gonna work for the other 3 either. Okay, so I want to pause here. We've gone through W, X, Y, and Z and determined that they cannot qualify as validating lives because there is a possibility, however unlikely, there is a possibility that 21 years after their deaths, we will still not have resolution to this future interest. Okay? Just like for any of them, we wouldn't know if the building was going to forever be used for school purposes, or we wouldn't know if the Grizzlies were going to leave Memphis or whatever. Okay? Here, it feels like W, X, Y, and Z can control this and that it will be good enough. But Alan has pointed out there is some small possibility, doesn't have to be a probability, just a possibility, that they won't. Okay, that they won't. So, Alan, do you want this to happen to W, X, Y, and Z?
No.
Of course not. That's not what the rule against perpetuities is asking us to do. It's not asking us what is the likelihood that something happens, how much do we want something to happen. It says, is it possible as a matter of logic that it will remain unresolved at that time, November 9th, 2041? If the answer is it's still unresolved, then they can't work as a validating life. Okay, so we've got W, X, Y, and Z gone. What about A? So someone else, can A qualify as a validating life? I can sense the reluctance because you all know the answer because I've already told you about this conveyance in the end. But you don't want to have to walk through it. All right, Hallie.
I think no, because it just seems the same that you wouldn't be able to be definitely certain.
Because what might exist in the world on the day A dies? Who might exist?
Her 4 children.
The 4 children, but those 4 children, we're going to have to kill those 4 children
Okay.
in our hypothesis. Who else might be alive on the day A dies?
A child she doesn't know about, or
Well,
you would know,
a child that hasn't been born yet at the time of
Mhm.
conveyance, but that at the time of A's death is how old?
Did we say 4?
Under 4,
Okay.
right? So why did we say 4?
Because then 21 years after, it might not be definitely resolved.
Correct, right? That child still could be A's first child to reach the age of 25, right?
Mhm.
They could be it. Or they could not be it, right? And if they're not it, if there is, Hallie, I just want to make clear, if there is no A's first child to reach the age of 25, if we say no one did,
Mhm.
then what happens to the future interest? Who does it go to?
Back to O.
Back to O. Great. That's the hidden reversion that's present here. Okay, so if there is no A's first child to reach the age of 25, then it goes to O, right? So it's, even though we don't call it this, it's as though O has a contingent reversion, right? We don't call it a contingent reversion, but it's kind of like that. They're in this game too. And so 21 years after A's death, it's possible that still O and this unborn child are still in the game, okay? They still could be the ones who take this future interest. Therefore, it's unresolved who is going to take the future interest. Therefore, there is no validation for A's life. Okay. So, Hallie, are you good with that? You think A fails?
Yes.
A fails because there is a chance that A will die with a child under the age of 4 who was born after the conveyance, who will eventually be A's first child to reach the age of 25. Because of that crazy turn of events, A cannot be a validating life. Okay. Yeah, Annie.
The way that the question is worded, the future interest isn't the kind of contingent reversion. Obviously, you said it's not called that, but wouldn't that be in both scenarios with W and with A? a certain future interest? Or are you asking for the, as it pertains to like A and her heirs only?
It is. So I'm going to go to step 4, Annie, and then I'm going to come back to your question. Okay? Because I want to play out what happens because none of these can validate the contingent remainder. Okay? Remember, the contingent remainder is the only one that's vulnerable to the rule against perpetuities. Okay? So I'm going to
Okay,
call
yes,
back.
sorry.
I'm going to call back on you in just a second to repeat that question. Okay? Are there other questions before we go there? Okay. So let's go to step 4. Okay. Step 4, if you find a validating life, which we didn't here, then you can move on and say, oh, that was fun. Okay. But if you cannot find a validating life, what you do is retroactively destroy the uncertain future interest. That when I say retroactively, it means that it's as though it was never created. So the conveyance that was to A for life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 25 created these contingent remainders. Well, we've found out that the contingent remainders can't be validated. Okay, they violate the rule against perpetuities. And therefore, we destroy them. And so the conveyance that was this becomes 2A for life. That is a straight A life estate. Grantor has reversion in fee simple. Okay? So that's the effect, that you destroy the contingent future interests. You act as though they were never there. Now, Annie, you asked, well, isn't it the case that that reversion will always be there? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, but I realized my question was stupid and off topic because this only pertains, that steps 1 through 3 really only pertain to the contingent or the executory interest. And I had forgotten about that.
Right.
So that makes more sense why you don't think about that.
And you can even see that that reversion in the end is going to be what takes, right? Here, the reversion is, it remains, and it is going to be the winner in this, right? So if the rule against perpetuities applies here, then it will, the reversion is going to be the interest that prevails, the future interest that prevails, and that grantor is eventually going to get a fee simple back.
So does this kind of go back to what you were saying last class about how future interest can kind of change depending on what is happening over time and stuff? Okay.
I don't think your question was stupid or off topic. And in fact, I think it reflected something that is perhaps the most confusing thing about the rule against perpetuities. And that is that the question we ask is not, does someone take it? After a life estate, someone is gonna take it. The question that we ask 21 years after A's death is, do we know who is gonna take it? Is it resolved? Is it uncertain or resolved? And so it might be that O takes it, and it might be that W takes it, and it might be that X takes it, and Y takes it, and Z takes it, and this afterborn child takes it, and whoever. The question isn't, do we know who takes it? Or do we know that someone takes it other than the grantor? The question is merely, do we know that we are gonna know the answer? Okay? Do we know that we are gonna know the answer? That's the question that we're actually asking. So that's why I focus in on this word resolved. Will it be resolved? Not, is there going to be someone who is A's first child to reach the age of 25? Okay? It's, will it be resolved? Who takes the future interest? The future interest is vested for. Okay? And so will it definitely be resolved? Will we know for certain the answer? Not what is the answer or does one of A's children take, but will we know the answer? That's all we're asking for. And I think that that's really hard to, it's just a hard question to even say, much less figure in our brains. Yeah, Annie.
So if you're allowed to take into account like freak accidents and everything, where is there a situation where you are certain, or is the whole point that you can never be?
Oh no, you can be. So I want to make sure that we're clear on step 4, and then I'm going to go through a similar example where we can validate someone's future interest. Okay. So the key thing here is that the destruction of the uncertain future interest happens, and it happens retroactively. It's as though there never was a contingent remainder. Okay. Peyton, the answer to your question, Peyton's asking in the chat, am I missing the reason a perpetual reversion is tolerated but contingent remainder and executory interest is not? No, there is no such reason. Okay. It is just that the distinction was made that interests held by the grantor do not trigger this concern, even though if the big picture problem is uncertainty, then a possibility of reverter or right of entry or reversion, those all create the same kind of uncertainty. Okay. And so it's actually less problematic with reversions than it is for possibilities of reverter and rights of entry, which could, if instead of, if we go back up here, if instead of 2A so long as used for school purposes, and if not, then to B, if it had just said 2A so long as used for school purposes, then we don't even apply the rule against perpetuities because there's no executory interest. But that too, like in the Marenholtz case, could go on forever. There is no justification for it. If I had to answer your question, I would say it's because the grantor doesn't have to convey it at all. And that if given the choice between keeping it entirely and giving it away to be used for school purposes, for example, while maintaining a future interest, then we would prefer to allow them to make their conveyance while keeping a condition on it. But I think actually that's a garbage answer, and that there's really no justification for it not applying in other circumstances. So I don't think you're missing anything. Okay. All right. So now, Annie, you want one that doesn't violate the rule against perpetuities. Okay, so I'm going to give you an easy one. To A for life, then to B. Is there a rule against perpetuities problem there? Certainly not. There's not even a contingent remainder there. Okay, what about to A for life, then to B if B reaches the age of 25? So let's find somewhere I can put it.
There is a contingent remainder there.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so there is a contingent remainder. A has a life estate, B has a contingent remainder in fee simple, and O has a reversion in fee simple. Okay, so hopefully everybody's seeing that. B has the contingent, assuming that B is under 25 at the time of conveyance, which we'll just say they are. Let's say they're 3. We'll make it a little tricky. So B is 3 at the time of conveyance. Whoops. So it's possible that B makes it to 25, but it's also possible that they don't make it to 25. All right, so step 1 is identify the interest. Step 2, identify the potential validating lives. Annie, who are our potential validating lives here?
A and B.
A and B. And I'm just going to give you all a hint. you're looking for the person who has the most impact on the contingency, not who is the most likely to take, like W in our previous example, but actually A is where we should have started. Okay, A is where we should have started because A has the most impact on A's first child to reach the age of 25. Okay, so you're right. Our best possible potential validating lives here are A and B. Which between those two has more of an impact on the contingency here?
Is it A?
I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know.
What is the
I feel like
contingency?
you literally just said, I feel like you literally just said A.
In the previous example, I said A, right? To A for
Uh-huh.
life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 25. There, it's A.
Okay. And
Here, what
here
is the contingency?
it's B, because it's just B just has to reach 25.
Yeah, A doesn't have anything to do with this, right? This is all about B, okay? And so the question we ask, so B as a validating life. That's where we're going. So step 3 is determine if any of these lives validate the conveyance. So we've said A and B maybe. We're going to start with B for step 3. So the question is, within 21 years after B's death, will the uncertain future interest okay? And so the question that we're asking, Annie, is within 21 years after B's death, will we know whether or not B reached the age of 25? Is the answer yes or no?
After 20 years, will we know if B ever reached 25?
Mhm.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
confused.
I'm making this way more
You're
complicated.
uncertain because this is an easy question, right? This is an easy question. If B dies, whenever B dies, we're going to know the answer, right? We don't even have to wait the 21 years after B's death. We will look and say, are you 25 or were you not 25? Okay. And if you're 25, then it's resolved one way. And if you're not 25, then it's resolved a different way. The point is not that we know that they're going to be 25 or not. The point is that we know that it's going to be resolved one way or the other. It is either going to be B was 25 when they died or B wasn't 25 when they died. And it doesn't matter which is more likely, which actually happens. All that matters is we will know at that moment in time, 21 years after B's death. And again, we don't even have to wait that long because we'll know right at B's death. And we might even know before B's death if they've turned 25. We will know it's going to be resolved as a matter of logic. Okay. And so if we found one, then we're good. It doesn't have to be validated for everyone, right? We don't have to then say, well, what if is A a validating life? So as long as you find a single validating life, then you're good. You move on. You check the box and you say, this does not violate the rule against perpetuities. It's just a regular old life estate contingent remainder reversion situation. And we don't have to go back in time and destroy this contingent remainder. Okay, so there's one example that does not violate the rule against perpetuities. Okay. By the way, Annie, what if I said then to B if B reaches the age of 96? Is that good? Same thing, right? It doesn't matter what age I put. Okay. But if I put A's first child to reach 25, that's a problem. Okay.
So is it helpful to look at kind of who holds the control over what could potentially happen? Like if the ball's in A's court, then it's probably an analysis of the rule of perpetuities. And if it's not, then
if you have an ascertainable person and that ascertainable person controls, like depends, the contingency depends on that person, then you're probably going to be okay. But if you have an ascertainable person like to A for life, then to B if the Grizzlies move out of Memphis or something like that, well, then you have a problem, right? Because then you have no one that you can point to that's going to control no life that is going to control in a time frame that contingency. So those kinds of contingencies, school purposes only, till something, that's out of everybody's control happens. Those are really sort of red flags. Ages help demonstrate the rule. Okay, so Annie, if you don't mind, let's do this one. To A for life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 21. Okay, we've already talked about why 25 doesn't work. What about 21? So this is the same. We're gonna put X, Y, W, X, Y, and Z still in. I'm just gonna go with W. Okay, so that's the interests. Potential validating lives, we're gonna say W and A. So Annie, which is more likely to affect this contingency, W or A?
A.
A. Okay, hopefully everybody's seeing that, because the first part of this contingency is that the person has to be a child of A, and A can keep having children and adopting children until A's dead. Okay, so at the end of A's life, what's going to happen to the class of people who could be A's first child to reach the age of 21?
What's going to happen to them?
What's going to happen to the class, to the group?
Their interests become possessory.
Not yet. So when A dies, so what you're saying, and I think your answer is right, that A has the most impact on this.
Mhm.
And that's because the group of people who possibly could be A's first child to reach the age of 21, first and foremost, have to be children of A. Okay? And can there be more children of A after A dies?
No.
For property purposes, the answer to this question is no. Okay? In science, in real life, actually, the answer to this question is maybe, right? And so I want y'all, if I haven't said it to this class, I'm saying it now. People cannot have children for property purposes after they are dead, even though scientifically people can have children after they are dead. But for property purposes, in our first year course, that cannot happen. Okay, so the group of people who are A's children is closed at the moment that A dies. So there can't be someone else jumping in. Okay, so the question we ask is, here the uncertain future interest is, who is A's first child to reach the age of 21? Or yeah, we'll leave that. Within 21 years after A's death, will it definitely be resolved, Annie?
No.
You sure?
Yeah, what if all of her kids die?
Then it'll be resolved, right?
Oh, okay. So yes.
So again, it doesn't have to be that someone has to get there. It has to be that we have resolved who's taking the future interest. Okay? And at that instance, if all the kids die, then O will have taken it. But the point is that we know it's not uncertain anymore, right? If all the kids die, then all the kids die. Okay, sadly. But we will know within 21 years after A's death if any of the kids have been the first to reach the age of 21, and if any of the kids will ever be the first to reach the age of 21. Okay, so the answer to the question is yes, this will be resolved because we will know the answer. We don't have to be able to say that there will be a child who reaches the age of 21, but we will know the answer to the uncertain future interest. Okay? Logan and Hallie, I see your hands. I just want to do one more thing. So another way you could save this, and this is how you're going to see it saved on my exams. So 25 is a problem, okay? But what I'm going to add in here is a clause that does what's called cabining. It cabins the contingency to a certain period of time. Okay. Then to A's first child to reach the age of 25 during A's life. That clause makes A validating life here. Because we will know at the end of A's life whether or not there has been a first child to reach the age of 25 during A's life. So what we're doing is defining in a time period, A's life, that the contingency applies and stopping it at the end of that time period. Okay. So there's 3 examples where we have similar conveyances to the one that was problematic. Similar conveyances that were all okay. Okay. To A for life, then to B. If B reaches 25, that's okay. To A for life, then to A's first child to reach 21, that's okay. To A for life, then to A's first child to reach age 25 during A's life, that's okay. All of those are okay. As a logical matter, the future interest will be resolved within 21 years at the end of A life. A life in being. Okay? Logan, what you got?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you said for the purposes of property that no children can occur for somebody after death. Does that include unborn children? So if A's wife is pregnant,
Yeah.
technically it's not born, but like.
So for our purposes, we're not gonna deal with that. There are statutes that deal with this exact thing because the problem, Logan, that you've raised, which is sort of a more immediate, like the child was not born, but was in gestation during this period. And so there's statutes that say it really means 21 years and 9 months, right? Like it sort of captures the gestation period. It becomes more complicated with frozen eggs or sperm that people can have children years later after death and technically have children. And again, there's statutes that deal with that that are beyond the scope of our course.
Gotcha.
Hallie?
I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding this. So the reason that 25 and 21 are different is because when it says 21 years after A's death, we will know if a child reached the age of 21. But
Exactly.
since the other one is 25 years after A's death, we won't 100% know that someone had reached the age of 21.
Exactly.
So you're comparing the number to the 21-year rule.
Correct. And
Okay.
when you say the 21-year rule, I would say the perpetuity period, right?
Okay.
And so that's exactly right. The reason that 21 works is because it is equal to the perpetuity period. 15 would work because it's less than the perpetuity period. 10 would work, 20 would work. But 21 and 1 day will not work because it's longer than the perpetuity period. Other questions? So I'd like to talk about the reforms briefly, just so it doesn't bleed into Wednesday. Let me find them. Okay. So we've had a lot of fun, I think, imagining what might have happened. And if you recall what I said in step 4, is that you destroy retroactively the uncertain future interests. So what's likely to happen here is that no one is paying attention to any of this until the moment that A dies. okay? Most likely, this is only going to be discovered as a problem at the moment that A dies. And at that moment, O is going to show up and say, hey, 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 W, who is now 50 years old, I hate to break it to you, but the conveyance violated the rule against perpetuities. And even though you were in real life the first child of A to reach the age of 25, your interest never existed. Okay, it was, and it's usually not O. It's going to be O's vindictive heir, right? So insert vindictive heir letter that you want. O's vindictive heir is saying, I can't believe that my ancestor gave you this contingent remainder, and I think it's garbage that you're getting it, and I want you out and off my family's property. And W, haha, this was a contingent future interest that was uncertain, and it violated the rule against perpetuities, and it was gone and destroyed and void from the start. And even though what actually happened was that it didn't remain uncertain, the rule against perpetuity says if it could have, at the moment of, we're dialing back time to say, well, we don't look at what actually happened, we look at what might have happened. And what might have happened, W, is that you might have died, and X and Y and Z might have died, and A could have had an an afterborn child that was under 4, and da-da-da-da. And W is going to be like, you're crazy, that none of that happened. Like, why are we having this conversation? And the vindictive heir of O is going to say, it doesn't matter, okay? The rule is you retroactively destroy the uncertain future interest. I will now take this property. Have a nice day. So that's horrible, because that's clearly not what was intended by the grantor. The grantor made it pretty clear that A's first child to reach the age of 25 should take. And W, in real life, was A's first child to reach the age of 25. So the first reform is to no longer retroactively destroy future interests, but rather look at a particular moment until, let's say, A dies, and say, is it still uncertain? Is it still unresolved? What actually has happened here? So in this instance, the bets that I was asking you guys to place might actually matter, right? It's most likely what's going to happen. But in fact, at the point that you're looking, you wait and see, and you see, you know what? What actually happened was it didn't remain uncertain. All those crazy turns of events, they didn't unfold. It just, 10 years passed, W became the first child to reach the age of 25, and that's what happened. And so we're going to cut out this really, kind of disastrous effect of retroactively destroying contingent future interests. And we're going to instead wait and see. And we're going to see how unresolved is this. And if it's resolved, then we're going to say, okay, it's fine. No harm, no foul. It might have been an uncertain future interest, but it actually ended up not being an uncertain future interest because it got resolved because W got to be the age of 25 or whatever. And since it did, we're going to say it's cool. So that's one reform. That can be done by statute, and some jurisdictions have done it judicially, that the rule against perpetuities only applies in a wait and see context. What is always done by statute, and what is the case in Tennessee, is we have a uniform statutory rule against perpetuities. It does the exact same thing as wait and see, except it defines it with a little more certainty. So rather than waiting till a certain period of time to wait and see, it says we look 90 years after the moment of conveyance and check. Is it still uncertain? If it's uncertain, we cancel it. If it's not uncertain, then it just plays out as though there was no rule against perpetuities at all. So in this example, if it's 2A for life, then to A's first child to reach the age of 25, and that happens in 1970, right? We would look in 2060 and say, well, do we know the answer to whose A's first child who reached the age of 25 was? Yes, we do. Okay, it's fine. So another version of wait and see, 90-year wait and see. Okay. And then the last type of reform is called judicial reformation. And I've already spoken about this on some level. Here, what we do is we allow judges to take into account the apparent intent of the grantor and tweak the language so that it doesn't violate the rule against perpetuities. So we gave the example before, 2A for life, then A's first child to reach the age of 21, right? So it said 25 and that was a problem. But if we just bump it down to 21, then we're good. Or a judge might throw in this savings clause, right? This caboting clause. Okay. And then the last is not really a reform as much as a reality. The reality is uncertain future interests show up a lot more within the confines of a trust than they do in outside of the trust. And uncertain future interests within the confines of a trust do not even trigger the rule against perpetuities. So another way in which to avoid rule against perpetuities problems is to put the uncertain future interests in the confines of a trust, okay, where they don't actually saddle the property with uncertain future interests. They just exist within the confines of a trust. So that's a fourth. It's not really a reform as much as a development, practical development in diminishing the import of the rule against perpetuities in real life. Okay. So I hope you guys, after all this, remember what I said at the very beginning, which is you're welcome, and don't spend too much time doing this to mastery. Okay. If you have the basic concepts, the basic application, that's going to be what you need for this course. And you can, as you encounter it in the future, learn it in more detail if that's what your practice entails. Okay. I'm done. I need Jack, Scott, and Audrey to stick around for just 5 seconds after class. You're not in trouble. And I'll answer questions as well. Okay.
Professor, could you repeat the last reform you said wasn't a reform?
Trusts.
Trust.
So most uncertain future interests show up in trusts and not as actual interests. They're equitable interests.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me real quick go to Scott, Jack, and Audrey. So y'all were assigned at the beginning Riddle versus Harmon as your stuff and as your case, and we're not going to do that case. So I want to reassign you guys. And so we have 3 assignments left. So my inclination is to just do it in this order. So Jack, you'll go to the Delfino. Scott, you'll go to Spiller, and Audrey, you'll go to Schwartzball. So unless you'll have any objection with that, then I'll send you an email confirming it. But I just wanted y'all to know what was up. And if you want to talk about Riddle, if you spent the whole semester preparing Riddle, I would be happy to host a separate session, just bonus material for you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Diana, yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, do you recommend any practice resources for rule against perpetuities or conveyances? I know that Quimby has some practice quizzes you can do, but I'm kind of struggling to find some stuff online.
The old exams are good. Okay. I think that from so there's 2 answers to this question. One is, I think from an explanatory context, that the Sprankling Understanding Property book really explains this stuff well. And there's some examples built into that, but it's more of examples and problems built in. But it's really more of text, text based.
Yeah.
I
have the book and I love it. Like, it's been
Yeah,
great.
it's great. And I think it's very straightforward, more straightforward than our case book.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a ton of examples. And so I think you can get conveyances from a lot of places. What I would worry with the caution that I offer is that their explanations might differ a little bit, right? So there might be things that either we haven't covered, or the way that I speak about them are a little bit different, or they include, angles that I go out of my way to not include on conveyances. Like if they don't have these savings clauses, then they're going to trigger the rule against perpetuities more often than I am. So I think that the examples can be useful, but it's a long way of saying no, I don't know of anything. But do problems that you're finding, and check the explanation. And if you're getting them right, then you're probably fine. If you're getting them wrong, maybe work with someone else or come to me and find out, like, is that because they're giving an answer that's slightly different than what he has taught us, or are we actually getting this wrong? So that's just the caution. So I would do as many problems as you can find. But I don't know that the explanations are going to always be helpful. And there's a danger that they can be hurtful if they confuse.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
But the old exams are your best place.
I have a quick question about the quizzes. Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought you left. Are we still doing those, and like, where is it going to be absorbed, the rest of those grades?
No, we're not going to still do them. So no. I mean, it'll just go into to the exam will count a little more.
Cool. Just wanted to double check and make sure.
I had a quick question as well. I feel like I understand the rule against perpetuities and how it works, but I fail to understand like the original intent
Okay.
of it.
Of the rule?
Yeah.
Okay. So the original intent is that so it only applies to these uncertain future interests, right? The ones that are like, we just don't know what's going on with them. And that's a problem to have those kinds of interests. You can create them, but it's a problem if they last too long, because it becomes hard to sell property that is saddled with uncertain future interests. And so it is an alienability promoting rule, right? It is meant to provide certainty where there would be otherwise uncertainty, in order to allow property to be able to be sold more easily. So that's really the underlying reason why it came to be. Property was being held indefinitely with these uncertain future interests on it, and that was making it impossible to sell the property like for its full value, because there was always this like lingering possibility that it would go somewhere else. And so is that making sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So they destroy those future interests. That's the solution.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of my thought. It reminded me of the Marinholtz, I think, case, and just in terms of like how you disperse your interest, a future interest, especially if it's something that's not certain. So
exactly. And that's why trusts avoid it, because trusts property that is held in trust can always be sold. And so since it can always be sold, you don't have the alienability problem. And since you don't have the alienability problem, there's no need to cancel out these uncertain future interests.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, yeah.
Are we all just gonna stare at each other for the rest of the
Nah,
time?
I was wondering, on your PowerPoint presentation for the slide 109, I think I was wondering why you changed the conveyance just to A, and I was wondering why it wasn't to A. If you can bring it up, might help. To A's first child. I was wondering if you can pretty much explain that part to me.
109. Are they numbered?
Your PowerPoint slides.
Oh, down here? Is this where you seeing the numbers?
You can go, yeah, can you go to 109? I think that was the one. Go to 110. Yeah, that one. How you mentioned it would go just to A for life. How come it wouldn't go to A for life then to A's first child? Would you not just omit the to reach the age of 25? That's what I was wondering.
Oh, I know what you're talking. You're talking about this.
That.
Right. So when it becomes something else.
Well, I understand why you're retroactively destroying it. I was just wondering why you're destroying that bigger portion.
The whole thing. Why do you destroy the entirety of this sentence instead of just then to A's first child? You're saying get rid of the first child to reach the age of 25. That wouldn't violate it. And so why is that what you're asking?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. The answer is because the rule is extremely harsh, and because this interest was given with that contingency, the entire interest is destroyed because the contingency is too uncertain. And so you're saying you would prefer, and in fact, it would be more consistent with the grantor's apparent intent to say to A for life, then to A's first child, right?
Right.
And I think you're probably right as a descriptive statement there, but the rule operates to destroy the entire interest, not just the contingency on the interest. So any part of the conveyance that is that is attached to that contingent future interest, including this part of it, it's all gone. It's a harsh rule. I don't know that there's another answer other than that's the way the rule operates, to eliminate all of the contingent future interest, not just the contingent part of the future interest.
Okay, so it just destroys the interest entirely.
Destroys the interest retroactively. It's as though it was never there. So you're saying like normatively that doesn't make sense. Like that's stupid to do that when the grantor clearly wanted it to go somewhere else.
Right.
And the response is then they should have had a better drafted conveyance. So yeah, I get what you're saying. That's just not how the rule operates.
Gotcha. That's what I was trying to figure out. And I had one more question. I don't know if you have time though.
Mm-hmm.
It's regarding the situation where if you were to mention to A for life, then to B, but if not used for school purposes, then to C. In that situation, how is C affected? If it's not used for school purposes, would C move up in the future interest, or would it take over the present interest?
You get A for life. Say the conveyance again.
So it'd be along the lines of to A for life, then to B, well, to A for life, comma, then to B, but if not used for a parking lot, then
to C.
Then to C.
Mm-hmm. And so if it stops being used as a parking lot, your question is what happens to C's interest?
Right. Because there's two ideal scenarios, right? Either, well, not ideal, like two maybe thought of scenarios. Mm-hmm. Either to A for life, then to B, either C takes over the present interest, or it takes over B's interest. And I think this is where commas play a big factor.
Yep. So it does not change the life estate. So the life estate is still there, and will continue just like all life estates do until it's finished. So in this example, C has an executory interest,
Right.
and it works to divest B of B's interest.
B
So
would
that does
have
not.
to-
Go ahead.
B has
So-
the divested or
Vested-
divested remainder.
Vested remainder subject to divestment. And so what happens in this example, if it stops being used as, or it stops being used as a parking lot, I can't remember how you phrased it, but if the thing happens, then C's executory interest divests the remainder, and C's interest becomes an indefeasibly vested remainder that now is waiting till the life estate ends.
Okay. And is there any situation where C would take the present interest? Okay.
Not if it's a life estate, or unless A sells it to them.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got that part taken care of, because I keep remembering executory interest as an aggressive, I'm taking over type interest. I just didn't know who was taking over in this scenario.
But it can take over, sometimes it will take over a possessory interest if it's a fee simple, right? So if it's a fee simple subject to an executory limitation with an executory interest and the thing happens, then yes, it will become possessory. But if all the action is happening in the remainder context, then the life estate just moves on. The life estate just continues on, and all the action is happening in the remainder space. So the executory interest is divesting the remainder.
Okay. That's definitely helpful.
Okay.
Cool. I appreciate you staying for us, Q.
Yep.
You have a
See
good
you
one.
later.